KFSR at CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
Welcome to another edition of the Central Valley Ledger. We're recording via Skype. Thank you to our friends at Skype for allowing us to record and use the software to do our show. Both myself and our guest we're both at home doing this interview. Our guest is James Caples. He's been a guest in the past. He's owns the restaurant Benaddiction Diner. James, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So the reason I wanted you as a guest this week is because, look, it's no secret. Small businesses, they're struggling right now. Restaurants in particular. Usually, I like to go to a restaurant. I like to sit in the restaurant. I like to, enjoy the atmosphere. These days, it ain't happening. So, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm good. We're like everybody. Our sales are definitely down. We're running about 30% of our normal sales, and that's definitely hard. It's not an easy way to go about things, but I'm a big believer that, you don't start a business because you want somebody to tell you what to do. You don't start a business because you want you want to have the answers all the time. You start a business because you like doing those things. So I had about a 2-week-long pity party where I just wanted to and did cry and was worried and was freaking out and didn't know what to do. And after that, I kind of sat back, I reassessed things, and I said, enough worrying about how we're not going to survive this. Let's start thinking about how we are. And, I made sure that every step we took along the way went through 2 filters. Is this going to make sure that my staff is okay? And is this going to make sure the restaurant's going to grow long term into the future? Not just, is it going to be something that's going to make us some money right now? And, God bless any restaurant owner who did whatever they needed to do that was legal to get through. But, I think a lot of the tactics that a lot of people were going through weren't necessarily, they weren't thinking about long-term sustainability. They were just thinking about, how do I sell enough to pay the bill this week? And, that's great. You paid the bill that week, but you got to make sure that you're thinking about the long-term future.
Before we continue, I want you to talk about, so there was some federal money that apparently was supposed to be the savior to small businesses. And then we heard things like and no offense to them at all, but Los Angeles Lakers got some money and some of the bigger restaurants got money, and no offense to them. But the point was that it was supposed to save small businesses. In your opinion, did it help you? Did you get any of it?
So I got PPP in the second round. Just heard that I might be getting some EIDL money as well. So
good.
One of the things that, I think was important for people to adapt out of is getting out of that pity party that we all went through faster, right? I got my PPP application in as soon as I could when the application got out. When I didn't get it in the first round, I was furious. So, like any furious business owner should have done, I called the manager at my bank, because I bank with a local bank, and I said, hey, saw that we have this, you guys put up a social media post that says, we got all this money out, we did all this lending for PPP. And, I just want to make sure that when the second round comes through, that small businesses are going to get through. Because the problem with PPP is, in general, we have a tendency when we write policy to not necessarily think about unintended consequences. And it was funny when the first round was done and you found out that Ruth Chris got it and you found out that Shake Shack got it, right? And everybody, all of those big companies said the same thing. Well, we had no clue it was going to run out that fast. And, I'm sorry, you can say no offense, but that's BS. That's just BS. Every small business owner in the country knew that money wasn't lasting more than a week. Every single one. The big small business, organization that I can't remember its thinking name right now, but they put out a thing to their, the people who are a member of their organizations, and they got them the application early. They said, get this in on day one because it's not going to last for more than 3 days. Everybody knew that money wasn't going to last. What they didn't realize for Shake Shack and Ruth Chris, or what I hope they didn't realize, and it wasn't just that they weren't smart enough to realize it was going to be a problem, is that as publicly traded companies, all of that big influx of cash is public knowledge. And as soon as that money started going out, every investigative journalist in the country started saying, who's getting this money? And they started checking the financial statements for the big corporations. And they started seeing all these corporations left and right that were pulling in this money. And, Shake Shack got a lot of praise for being the first one to give it back. And I don't, I mean, good. I'm glad they gave it back, right? There are a lot of organizations that didn't. But, giving them praise for that, I think is the wrong message. I think what we need to do is find the organizations who are of their size, who just had the common sense not to take it in the first place. There are plenty of big corporations out there who needed the money, or you didn't need the money, who wanted the money, who could have used the money. But they said, we can get this through shareholder debt. Like we have other access to this. And the biggest thing for me about making sure that publicly traded corporations aren't getting that money is that as a publicly traded corporation, you are legally responsible to make sure as much money as you can is going to your shareholders at the end of the year. So no matter how you're dealing with that PP money, when it comes into you, you're legally obligated to make sure as much of it as possible gets to your shareholders. And that's not what that money is meant for. For me, like I have that money. I got my package from them. I took 75% of it. I put it in a separate account. And every 2 weeks when payroll comes out, we take the money for that payroll and we put it back into the account so that we can track to make sure, hey, this money is meant for my employees. It's going to my employees. We're starting to rev back up some training. We're starting to, just bring some people in. What I was saying earlier about making sure that our decisions were designed to make sure the business was successful long term. What we started doing is we've designed labels and bags, and we're starting to bag our pancake mix and our biscuit mix, the dry mixes for both of those things. And we're going to start selling those online and hopefully eventually get them into grocery stores. We've started making sure, we put together a website that we're going to run soon that's going to have an online shop for our jellies and our jams and our t-shirts and stickers. And, my like you said, my logo is a big thing to me. So, we want to make sure that we have as much of that ability going out as possible.
So, but let's not, well, maybe you're the better person to answer this question, but just because you receive some money, it doesn't, it's not the same like pre-coronavirus, right? I mean, it can't substitute when customers came in and because you had a very successful, and you still do have a very successful business. I don't want folks to say, oh, that restaurant or that company got money, that's enough, they can survive. I don't believe that's the case.
No. I mean, having the money is definitely helpful, right? And having the money definitely took a load of stress off. Like you go from worrying about being immediately closed, like only having a couple weeks to be able to, get things right, to being in a situation where, you have a few months that you can kind of breathe a little bit. And, you have the ability to say that, we can, if we have to wait a little bit longer, we can wait a little bit longer. And, it might be that I'm just a little different minded than a lot of the restaurant owners in town. But, for me, but part of what's different for me in my situation compared to, a lot of other people is my rent's only, a fraction of what everybody else's rent is. And it's something that I was having a conversation with my dad earlier today. We were actually days away from signing a lease on a building that was 3 times the size of our current.
Wow. Wow.
We had been negotiating for months. We had been going back and forth on what the floor plan was going to be. And, like we had gone into a meeting where the landlord basically said, hey, you need to, move or get off the pot. And we, it was the week that we went to, like half capacity in restaurants. And it was like that day was the day of the last meeting that we had. And I said, I'm sorry, there's just no way, not knowing what's about to happen, that I could sign anything until I know that we're through whatever we're about to go through. And then like 2 days later, they said, more people in your dining room. And that was, I mean, it's a big blow. Breakfast restaurants in particular, it's not a food that people typically think of to get for takeout. And it's a food that, people who are working from home right now, or the people who, are getting the extra unemployment, so they have a little bit more spending money than they usually would. They may be eating out 2-3 times a week, but you're also home 7 days a week. So if you're eating out 2-3 times a week and you wake up in the morning, you think, well, I could buy breakfast and then cook dinner later, or I could eat a bowl of cereal and I can buy dinner and then I don't have to cook all day. And, I think for a lot of people, that's a decision that unless you're actively saying, like, I'm going to go support Benaddiction or Waffle Shop or, Batter Up or whoever it is, it's a little extra fight for us to try and like stay in the front of mind. That's definitely a challenge.
Speaking of people wanting to support you, I've read Facebook posts. I mean, or restaurants like yours have a following. How generous has the community been? I mean, I could imagine that as soon as the call to shelter in place was placed, I can imagine people purposely came to visit you to purchase food.
Yeah, the first week, as people adjusted, was really terrible. That very first week, sales were almost non-existent, and that definitely didn't help the pity party that we were all going through. But once people started to realize that this was going to last, and people, Fresno's a great community that, like, I just don't think as many of us realize we are. And, people want our local restaurants to succeed. I grew up here, and I grew up in a Fresno, I grew up out in Clovis, and growing up out in Clovis at that time, literally the only restaurants I can remember in my childhood were Red Robin, Olive Garden, and in the entire Clovis, that's what I remember. Red Robin, Olive Garden, IHOP, and Sal's. That was it. And you went to one of those 4 corporate chains. And I think that my generation of Fresnans have kind of really grasped onto the idea that Fresno is a great city. It is not the city that so many people have made it out to be in Karate Kid and Con Air and all the movies that were the butt of the joke of.
Agree with that 100%. And talk a little bit about how long do you think it's going to take you to get back to where you were? I mean, it's hard to say. This is a hard question. It might be a little unfair to ask, but I want people to realize that, there's this group of people out there who think that, okay, as soon as we say that restaurants can open, the floodgates will open and people are going to go. But even if they do, there are social distancing rules now.
Yeah. So my biggest concern with that is people being patient. We already, without social distancing, with our tiny little dining room, we would run an hour and a half wait on the weekends to get a table. And I'm remodeling my dining room right now, like by myself. I literally took my old booths apart, brought a saw to the dining room, got some old booths from a Coco's auction that has been sitting in my garage that I got, years ago. And I literally took one of those apart and made a mold template and have been rebuilding new booths for my dining room to make it a little bit more throughput friendly and to help kind of measure out, how we're going to survive better. But that's normal times, right? So the first phase for bringing restaurant dinings back is I think it's 2 guests per 500 square feet. I own a 1,000 square foot restaurant. So for the first phase, I'm pretty much takeout only anyway. I mean, that's just going to be the way we're going to be. And for me, I think one of the things that's been interesting is, I worked my entire career before I owned my own business in restaurants, full service managing, corporate restaurants. And I left those and I opened a food truck. And when I opened the food truck, I had to teach myself how to be a fast food restaurant because I never actually worked in fast food before. I'd always worked in sit down dining. So I had to completely just reframe my state of mind into a completely different thing. And the way I like to tell people is asking somebody who works in a full service restaurant to suddenly do fast food is like going to a lawyer who's been doing workers' comp their entire life and saying, I want you to try this capital punishment trial. They're the same basic industry, but they're 2 completely different lines of work. And, you do them completely different ways. So I did that for a couple of years, and then we opened the restaurant, and we decided to open the restaurant as a full service restaurant. So we turned back around and, okay, now I have to teach myself to go back to full service. And I take that fast food concept I developed, and I turned it into a full service restaurant. And we've been running that for 5.5 years now. And they said, okay, be fast food again. And that switching your food, finding people, getting people to understand and be patient about the fact that you're not going to be perfect at it at first. And you have to make some adaptations to what you're doing to make it sustainable long term. That's the thing that I worry about most.
I heard from a friend of mine the other day, well, filet mignon doesn't taste good when it's takeout. And I think the point he was trying to make is certain items on the menu cannot be good for takeout. So what do you
learn to adapt your food? And that's one of the things, I was saying people need to be patient, is that, and it's not just people, the restaurant owners need to be thinking about these things, right? Like if you own a restaurant and you haven't made your food, taken it home and eaten it at home to see what it's like, you're failing yourself. Like these are the things that need to be like menu planning 101 in everything you do. And it took me a couple of weeks to learn that. And once I did it, I learned, we need to start serving all of our hollandaise sauces and things and ramekins on the side, not on top of the eggs in the box, because it hardens in the box, like it causes problems with the eggs, and same thing. If you want an over medium egg, like I'm really sorry to everybody watching right now, just so you know, if you want an over easy egg, you're going to have to cook it yourself at home. Like your egg's going to be over medium, because I put it in the box over easy. But by the time you get it home, between the steam from everything, like we're lucky if it's still over medium when it gets there. So, it's just the things that you have to adapt to.
Looking at some of these bigger restaurants, I don't know how they're doing it, because again, you've got some specialty items that they're selling that, to go just doesn't work out for them. I want to ask about some of the other folks in your restaurant business. Some people have been more vocal. You've made some comments, but you're not in front of the news, making comments or objecting and stuff. But some of the others have. Can we blame someone like the Waffle Shop for wanting to open, or someone like Mike Sherinian at Elbow Room for pulling out of the mayor's team? The way I look at stuff like that, people are frustrated. This is their survival, correct?
Yeah, there's definitely a point to that. I would say that if you're struggling financially and if you're worried about whether or not your business is going to make it through this, intentionally inflicting yourself with $6,000 in fines doesn't necessarily seem like the smartest move to make to keep yourself busy long term. I try not to get involved in other people's business. The one thing I will say outside of what I just did about the situation is I think if it were me and if I were in that situation, what I would be saying is, if I were trying to get myself on television advertising for the amount of time that Waffle Shop has been mentioned on television over the last few weeks, the amount that you would pay for that is substantially more than $6,000. So if you have an advertising budget for this period of time and you say, well, this is, paying it as a fine and getting the free advertising and getting the people rallied up to come support us is as valuable to me as just paying for an ad on radio or social media or whatever, then it's a wise financial decision. If you think that you don't have that budget and you're just not controlling your anger very well and you're putting your business in bigger concern, well, I don't understand that business decision. My biggest concern about what was going on with them is they were getting a lot of news coverage. And when that happens and you have a lot of other businesses that are struggling and a lot of other businesses that are trying to figure out what to do to get people in their front door, and you see this guy being on TV, every newscast for 4 or 5 straight days, you start thinking, well, maybe if I do it too, I'm going to get that. But the thing is that's not how news works. The first guy gets the news coverage. Everybody else is just somebody else who followed in his footsteps. You might get a secondary nod of like, oh yeah, this guy's doing it too. But it's not going to be enough to get customers coming out to pay your $1,000 or $6,000, $5,000 fine. I was surprised that they went to 5,000. I thought that they would just do the $1,000 fine, get the coverage and then call it quits. Going into the 6, I think they did because they had guests pay the entirety of the $1,000 fine. Right? So if you have guests pay the entirety of the 1,000, then maybe you go, well, maybe they'll pay the 5,000 too, and then you get the 5,000, and they only pay 1,000 of it. And you go, okay, well, it was good advertising cost, but we're not going to pay the 10, right?
Interesting. I didn't even think about it along those terms, but you make absolute sense that, it's good publicity that he generated, and he has he has a following now. I know people that say that they're going to go to the waffle shop and order takeout because he fought, the whole you fight, and so
everybody wants to go support the guy who fought the system, right? And hey, if that's the crowd you want, good. You fight for that crowd as much as you can.
Let me ask you about your menu. You have been cautious about changing your menu because, when you first started up, I've followed you for a long time. When you first started up, I know that each item on the menu had its little, you created it, it was special. You changed your menu, you did it, and I was surprised. But what do you have to say for doing that? Because, and I'll tell you why. The other day, I was looking through the menu of one of my other restaurants that I go to, and I saw that he had changed the menu, and I go, hey, the thing I used to eat is not on the menu anymore. But I don't blame them for doing it, right? I mean, what was the reason for you to do that? And did it save you, from throwing things out?
So it's a couple things. Part of it is just trying to reduce waste, right? So we got rid of items that, in general, my menu's huge, and a lot of it involves a lot of like multi-use products, right? So I immediately went through, and anything that was only used in one or two products, I just got rid of. And once I had lost those, I went for a while with almost the entire menu. And a couple weeks ago now, I went through and I printed out the sales mix for the entirety. I printed out 4 weeks before shutdown and the 4 weeks after shutdown. And I just started going through and looking at what had changed, what sales had gone up. Because there's some things, we have these little breakfast corn dogs. It's like a breakfast sausage wrapped in pancake batter, deep fried on a stick. And we, in the 4 weeks after shutdown, had only done 1 week's worth of sales pre-shutdown. But the sales of those had almost tripled. People think about those things when they order, and they say, well, I want to order something that's still going to be good. Our pancake sales, way up. Our Benedict sales, way down. So I went through and I got rid of all but the 4 most popular Benedicts. I went into the pancake section and I got rid of all but the 5 most popular pancakes. Most of the French toast stayed because, anything that's like an expensive product that I didn't use in a lot of places, we just took off the menu, and it ended up, we're about half the size of our normal menu right now.
Why should people come out and support restaurants like yours? Why? I mean, for me, I do it because I know that, look, so, usually we cook at home, but I'll tell you, during this whole shelter in place, we've been eating out a lot. And the reason why I do it is I want to support the restaurant owners. I mean, there's more to a restaurant than the food. It's the people, like someone's dream. That's someone's dream that we're helping support.
I look at it this way. I left corporate restaurants because when I worked for the corporations I worked for, it was pretty much a standard idea that you were going to work 10 to 11 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. That's just what you work. Your salary is okay. It's not fantastic. And that's just the idea, right? And my industry is populated with this idea that like horrible hours and being mistreated is like a badge of honor. You talk to chefs, and the horrible mistreatment that we all brag about is just insane. Like I worked 18 hours straight one time at a PF Chang's cleaning copper pipes under a bar so that they shine. I got home 45 minutes away, and by the time I got home, I had like permanent circles in my back for like 2 days from the mats that I'd been lying on while I did it, right? And like this is something that I don't talk about as like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like I got a smile on my face because this is just, it's just we're deranged. And I left that because I got tired. Like I was like, look, if I'm gonna work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, instead of shipping all this money to Colorado or Arizona or wherever the corporate office of that particular corporation was, why not put that work in and keep it doing it for myself? And it took, we opened the business in 2012, so it's been 8 years. And it took 6 of those to get to a point where like or 5 of those to get to a point where I was making money. Another one to get to a point where I was making anywhere near what I was making before I left the last corporation. And I'm now making, like I make more than I made when I left there, like we're finally at a point where things are comfortable. And, thanks to being able to get PPP and EIDL, and thanks to like the amazing Benedicts in Fresno, we might be able to come out of this, like we're not going to do a 3,000 square foot space anymore. I was telling my dad earlier, I graduated high school in the year 2000. In the 20 years since I left high school, there have been 3 major recessions in the United States. And I think that any restaurant owner who's planning on carrying more than $7,000 a month in rent going forward is asking to just die, whatever those recessions come. So for me, I mean, we're looking that instead of moving into a 3,000 square foot spot, we're going to look for another 1,000 to 1,500 square foot spot. And as long as it doesn't last too long and we're able to kind of capitalize on where we're at, we should be able to get in there before next year.
Great point, great point. And so thank you, James, for joining us. By the way, if you were wondering who it was that was coming behind me walking around, you learn so much during these record at home sessions. I see your dog right next to you. And then this is Arthur, who decided to talk to me during the interview. But it's so cool to be doing recordings like this, because we get, it's like a little piece of our home life that we don't, the world doesn't see, right?
And real down about it. And every time I start like really hating this whole process, I just remember like they had to do this in 1918 with the technology of 1918. Like, can you imagine what it would be like to be going through this without Skype and Zoom and video games and online learning? And I mean, bad, but it could be a lot worse for everybody.
Well, thank you, James. Good luck to you at Benediction. We will visit you, and it sounds like the community has been very supportive, and that's wonderful, because you're that person with the dream to open the restaurant. You got a wonderful family, and you're doing it all, and that's, people see that, and we want to support you.
Hey, most important thing about being successful in Fresno is, as long as you love Fresno, Fresno's going to love you. It's a good town. It's a great city. Like I said earlier, we just all need to remember it and act like it.
On that note, thank you to our audience members watching this broadcast on CMAC, Comcast 93, and AT&T 99. Our guest this week has been James Caples. He's the owner of Benediction over on Bullard and Marks. Go out and visit James. Get yourself some delicious breakfast items. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you to AT&T, Comcast, and our friends at Skype for making this interview happen. Tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.